So welcome everyone. Today we're speaking with veteran coach and entrepreneur Rory Miller. Rory, how you doing today, man?
Man, I'm excellent, dude. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So Rory and I go maybe a ways back, depends. In the internet world, a year is like 5 years in real life, civilian world. But so I've known Rory for a while, different groups, different training programs, and also getting to work with one another in different projects. One of the reasons why I brought Rory on here specifically, one, he has amazing life experience that I don't think a lot of people can relate, but we can relate to in some instances of what he's experienced and how we go through either difficulties or hardships or even just facing tough challenges. Our conversations with Rory today are going to be, how do you face difficulties mentally, but also how you can get out of the coziness of your own comfort and expand into what may be fearful to achieve a certain excellence or a certain goal, if it's in your life, if it's in your relationships, if it's in your career. So that's why we got Rory on today. So Rory, just tell a little bit more background around you and who you are, veteran coach, entrepreneur. I'll raise my hand because that's a little weird, but just a little background about you and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've lived a couple of lives now. The first part of my life was your pretty normal, go to high school, go to college, do all that. And then when I had to drop out, I ended up getting into personal training and did that for several years, really loved it. But I sort of had this crisis of self when I was like 26 and realized that I had this dream that had been with me since I was a kid of joining the military. And I realized that, I was kind of getting to that age where if I didn't do it now, I was never going to do it. So, on a whim, kind of, I joined the military and I went straight into training to go through a pipeline where the Army will basically take you from off the street to special forces. And it took me about 3 years to do that, but I made it to the special forces teams and it was my entire focus for 3 years. And as luck would have it, a few months into my first deployment, we found out I have a heart condition. And long story short on that, it basically came down that I either had to have surgery on my heart or I was going to be done in the military. So I was faced with this decision of, do I give up everything I've worked so hard for and not have heart surgery, or do I have the surgery? And I was young, I was 30, so I skipped the surgery. And my wife and I ended up getting out of the military because of that. But we saw that coming, so I was able to start a business to replace the income we had in the Army. And so I started the business about 2 years ago, and we've been out for about a year now. And I've also really been working on taking, everything that's brought me here at 33 and distilling that down into something that I could teach other people. And so that's one thing I'm really passionate about doing now.
That's incredible, man. So if you don't mind me asking, diving a little bit more into like the heart condition, did that ever affect like the physical conditioning and the things that you had to go through, or?
It didn't actually start manifesting until towards the end of the training. So one of the last parts of my training was learning a language. So it was a lot of classroom. It wasn't as physically active as some of the other stuff. And I remember doing a workout on my own, and I felt kind of weird, but I didn't put together until years later what it was. I was on deployment and I was doing some training with our dive team, and they do some pretty rigorous pool workouts. And so it's just one workout. We did something really hard, and it, like I said, I kind of felt funny, but I'm working out with a special forces dive team. Of course I feel funny. And it wasn't, we're not really in the habit of raising our hand and saying, hey, I'm uncomfortable, I want to stop. Like, you just do what you have to do. So I just happened to bring it up, a few hours later with the medic on my team. And he said, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not normal and you probably shouldn't be going underwater anymore. So that was the beginning of that. It took 6 months and 12 doctor visits, I think, and 3 different physicians before we finally nailed down what it was and were able to get a diagnosis and talk about what was next.
In that story, I think you subtly mentioned something that can be easily glossed over: the distinction between comfort and the distinction between, going and pushing through it and having the perspective of saying, maybe this is a little bit too much, having that risk analysis of pushing through. How it's very common, like, oh, max out, push through, one more,
Right.
whatever that is, right? But then there is a line where there's logic and reason drawn. Like, is it healthy to push through past that limitation? And physical exercise, or like you mentioned with your condition, is a simple line. But also when we talk about with things that we can't really assess based on effort, it's just pushing through on discomfort in taking a task, speaking to someone, making that phone call. Like, how do you, because I want to discuss it first physically, then we can translate this into actual like work. How do you now gauge when is it pushing it too far, when being uncomfortable is okay, and then the limit between being super uncomfortable and this is not okay?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm actually really glad you brought up the dichotomy between the physical and the non-physical, because I believe that the physical is a great sort of microcosm of the way that the rest of the world works. And so much of what applies to physical training and everything that goes with that can be extrapolated into business. But the question to how do you decide when it's too much is it's really simple. It all comes down to values. So when you make a decision to do something, it's because you value that thing. And then at some point throughout the journey, if it becomes uncomfortable, you're faced with another value decision. Either you value that thing enough to keep going, or you value comfort more than pursuit. And then you choose comfort and you bail out. And so that's why it's a very simple yes or no discussion about whether or not you keep pursuing thing. Well, do you still value the thing that you decided to pursue in the first place? If yes, then you'll pursue through all kinds of comfort.
Or discomfort?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, comfort, in my opinion, is you staying the same, right? Like it's naturally our bodies are designed to keep us in a sort of homeostasis, right? We like to be a certain degree. We like to be a certain amount of fed. We like to be a certain amount of hydrated. Like we want to stay at that baseline. And the same thing is true emotionally, spiritually, and everything else. So comfort is you staying where you are. But just as the quote goes, like everything you want is on the opposite side of your comfort zone. Because if you were comfortable with what you wanted, you would have it already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a perspective there. I think one of the big things that I want to kind of pick your brain on is taking risks that aren't mindless risks, right? Taking risks outside of that comfort zone to expand. And I know the comfort zone, I don't want to say it because it's a cliche, but pushing beyond what you feel is comfortable. Either you can change that discomfort through perception, through actually taking action, through experiencing yourself, accomplishing something in the past, right?
Right.
Pushing that. But then there is also, especially in the physical sense, there is a point where it might be mindless and almost self-hurting to push past too much discomfort. So how do you distinguish that when it comes to, the non-physical sense, like the action taking, the pursuing relentlessly towards a goal?
Yeah, I almost think it's easier on the non-physical side, because I think that no matter what the risk is, it's never fatal.
True.
It's always a recoverable risk, right? So in terms of the mindless sense, I think I go back to values on that. Like it's never, it's either bringing you closer to your goals or it's not. And I'm trying to quickly kind of come up with a scenario where there might be a situation where you would sort of be like mindlessly taking risks. And I guess to some degree, taking action without having a clear idea of the things you value is mindless. I mean, that is mindless risk, right? Like if I just decide, hey, I want to make a certain amount of money, and I just start doing a bunch of stuff without any further thought, like that's kind of mindless risk, right? Like I'm potentially setting myself up to lose in a bunch of ways. But if you start with that sense of like, what do I value and what is the thing that I'm trying to move towards, even though it's outside of my comfort zone, then I don't know, there's a sense of purpose in that. You know what I mean?
That's true.
It's not mindless in that moment. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, it's a tough question to answer, but I think what you mentioned there for having a mission, pretty much the purpose behind something, and it's not just your own values too that you take into account for, it's a responsibility of shared values, either your team values, your family values, 100%. Especially for those who are under your responsibility. And this is not some sort of hierarchical thing, but it's like legitimately no person, no man or woman is an island. We're all connected or interwoven in some communal sense. If it's a business, if it's a family, if it's a community, and we have shared responsibilities, and we have people depending on us, unless you're living isolated in an island, which there in case you are an island. So, but
yeah, and I mean, I'm glad you said that, because that was one of the things I was thinking about too with the military training. Like one of the values is not letting the other guys down. Like even if the mission isn't that important to you, like there's a certain value that helps you push through, of like being united in the thing that you're trying to do together. So yeah, I mean, that's nobody's an island. Having that network and that shared values is really important.
Exactly. And then for essentially when you're pursuing a goal, I know that for us, it's pretty simple for you and me to say, you know what, I will bust through any wall, any obstacle, any discomfort getting between me and the outcome that like we're on a mission to achieve. It's easy for this, but how would you respond to those who may be more sensible? Like, that sounds very too hard for me. Like that sounds like that's not me. That's not who I am. I'm not that type of person. I'll do it. I'll take my time, but I'm not going to bust through walls. Like there's a different perspective. And how do you address that?
I mean, really at the root of all that for me is stories. Like that's it baked into all that language is a story that somebody's telling themselves. And those are all red flags for me that somebody has limiting beliefs about who they are or how they approach life or what they're capable of. I always look at it first, sort of the binary marker for me is, has another human being done this thing before? And if it's been done, then I really know there aren't any actual limits. Like I can manufacture my own limits and say, well, I can't do that because of, this predetermined set of characteristics I have, but it's really just a bunch of nonsense. And I think what it boils down to is people sabotaging to stay in their comfort zone. But that being said,
well, some people may move through their discomfort zones at a different pace, at a different format that we might be used to, right?
Yeah, and I'm definitely not here to tell somebody that their pace is wrong if they can walk me through why it's right for them. Like if somebody has a purpose or has a reason for saying like, this is how I operate and this is my plan and I'm executing it, I'm not the one to come in and say, hey, your plan should be, let's fast forward at 6 months. Mm-hmm. But the person that doesn't have a plan and says, well, that can, and is still putting up defenses, then I'm a little more, I'll press that person a little bit more. But at the same time, I think part of coaching in general with all of these discussions is helping somebody see something bigger for themselves than they see for themselves.
Like and guiding them through that.
Yeah, there's that challenge. There's like as a coach,
yeah,
I don't see you the way you are. I see you the way you're going to be in 6 months. For most people, you might see yourself the way you were 6 months ago. And so now there's a gap. And who's right? Well, we both are. And my job is to try to bring you towards this vision. And to some degree, your job is to stay the same, And so I think that's part of really like coaching people is helping them see this bigger vision for themselves.
But sometimes comfort just feels good, man. So, let's go back to the physical sense, man. Dude, so when I train or when we train for a long time, and so it's just so you know, we're training for a 12-hour Tough Mudder right now.
All right.
Don't ask me why.
Because why not?
Don't ask me why. No, there's a few reasons why, but essentially when we do those kinds of trainings, so we do either 2 or 3 hour trainings, whatnot, early in the mornings, you get a consistent rhythm of going. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm okay to bust through this, take cold showers, do these trainings, get my body and my mind ready. But then there's also that feeble zone when either I don't train for a week or I get fatigued or sick and you get complacent, like, oh, I don't want to train anymore, or I have to push myself past that barrier. And I know that past that barrier, that's where life is. That's like where anything that you either want to achieve or any significant value that you want to contribute to society is, even if it's just your family. That's not to say that's not society, but even as small as the family unit, as big as the communal unit, it's always beyond that initial effort, that initial push and angst to something greater and broader. So, comfort is nice, but how do you balance that between always pushing and always, or even being not as strong?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it always comes down to my sense of purpose. And there's sort of the global sense of purpose for how I show up and everything that I do. And then all the way down to the micro, like what's my purpose for today? Right. And the purpose is what causes you to drive on. And when your purpose is greater than the whatever obstacles, you're going to continue. And I'll give you an example. So like in the military, we do obviously a lot of physical training.
Yeah.
Quitting is not something most people think about. You just don't, because you know that what you're training for is a life or death situation, and you're not going to have the opportunity to quit. You value being good at your skill and good at your trade because it's going to potentially be life or death someday. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy in that sense to take training and all that seriously. When we get out, so like you doing your Tough Mudder, what is your purpose for doing the Tough Mudder? Like when your purpose is so strong that you can't even think about procrastinating anymore, you won't have any of those issues. You know what I mean?
No, I see what you're saying.
And so it's just creating.
I know that a lot of people don't have that though. And I 100% respect, the military and the veterans, but not everyone is under life or death situations.
Sure.
And having that experience, I think it may make post, coming into training for something difficult or pushing through something hard, it may make it easier because you're comparing it to a true life or death situation, which a lot of people don't really face in our new era. So how do you, with a purpose that's very strong, and I've heard that before, right? But how do you translate that? How can you create, if it's just, the answer is purpose, but how do you create something so strong where it's equitable to a life or death situation? Like if I don't do this, then I'm not fulfilling, my full potential.
Yeah. I think one way that I've done it, and this may or may not be right for everybody, is I have created a very clear image of the person that I want to be whenever I die. Meaning,
Okay.
like, what kind of a person do I want to have other people talking about when I leave? And that person behaves a certain way, that person does certain things, that person has certain priorities and certain values. And
Mm,
that sense of who I want to be is what colors the decisions I make.
yeah.
Like, there are two types of me. There's the me that sits on the couch and eats eight bags of potato chips a day, or there's the me that gets out and does my exercise.
Yeah.
Which one do I want to be? And I get to make that choice. And I don't make that choice right all the time. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong.
We're all weak. I know. I know.
There are days where you make the wrong choice, but the point is, it almost feeds forward that if I do make the wrong choice today, I'm less likely to make it tomorrow, because I'm not willing to string together those days that would eventually make me the person that makes a habit of sitting on the couch and eating chips. You know what I mean? And so I think people need to create an image of themselves that draws them forward, create an idea of themselves. I mean, so many of us are always limited by our stories about ourselves. I'm just not an organized person. Oh, my whole family's angry. I just have a bad like we literally manufacture stories about ourselves from our past that influence how our future happens. Well, like,
Mhm.
what if we just stop and we created a very clear description of what we wanted future us to look like, and then we let that be the standard that we acted towards?
So pretty much also relating it to the reality of death, the memento mori, knowing that we will
Yeah,
one
if you
day.
don't want to be as morbid, you could always think about like having your 100th birthday and like, what would that be like? I mean, that's a more positive version,
That's
but
cute. Yeah. I actually would encourage you, though, for everyone to be looking at themselves either cremated or an open casket, and what's playing on the display of your life story. I know that's like, whoa, that's like 0 to
it
60,
is, yeah.
kind of bad, but it's a reality that we all face. It's a
Yeah.
reality that will happen. If you haven't seen it, like, go visit a cemetery. I'm seriously, like, it's part of life.
Well, I mean, on top of that, like go skydiving, like put yourself in a real life or death situation.
Whoa.
I mean, it just, you start,
This is
you suddenly
this is not an
realize like,
advertisement to go skydiving or
but it's helpful to be in situations where you realize that like this can go away in a blink. I mean, you think about today, there's probably a dozen stories of some person who just got in a bad car wreck suddenly and they're dead at 40. That's it. Their life
yeah,
was over.
no day is guaranteed, and I understand that. But
So,
it's also it's good to you can, without even leaving your room, whatever you do listening to this right now, you can perceive.
training for a tough mudder.
Yeah, but you can perceive that one day you will die and understand that. And I
Right.
think it's healthy to remember that, maybe even once a day, just to have an object that reminds you one day I will die. And you don't know if that's today, you don't know if that's tomorrow, right? Or you don't know if it's 20, 50 years from now, right? But it's also saying that the time that you have here, it's limited, but it's also you can make the most out of it and how you want to live. And it is a choice. For most it is a choice. And this is excluding those parameters of situations or life scenarios that aren't very much a choice.
Right.
But for the rest, for a lot of us, it is a choice.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the helpful benefits of all this is that when you do that exercise, you're going to find yourself a lot more grateful for everything else anyway. I mean, you suddenly become aware of just how good you have it. And that's a really positive energy to be in. Also, a lot of good things are born out of that grateful energy.
That's true, because what it forces you to do is to step outside of yourself.
Right.
No longer am I the center of my own universe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's a really good point. That's another big piece of it, right? Like staying in your comfort zone is all about you. That basically says that you are the most important thing in the universe. Like, your comfort is all that matters. And that's what indicates what decision you should make. If you start zooming outside of yourself a little bit, you realize that there's bigger things at play and that your comfort isn't that important. Like, it's less important to me to be comfortable than it is to be a good father. It's not always comfortable for me to do the right thing. It's just not. Sometimes I don't want to do what my kids require or need me to do. Sometimes I don't want to have the hard discussion with my wife about things we need to work on. Those things are uncomfortable, but it's not about me. Like, my life is about the contribution I leave for others. And I think all of our lives are that way. I mean, and the trick is just getting other people to realize that.
Well, that's also even the definition of like giving, right? Or of true love. It's not an emotion, it's not a feeling, it's an act. Well, what is that? It's giving for the good of the other person, even if that means it's not going to be always the good for me.
Right.
So being bold, taking risks that aren't mindless, and standing your ground. What so in your experience, I've read your posts of like pretty insane or wild stories of physical endurance. And I mean, knowing me that I'm going to probably do one of those one day, but how do you push through mentally? What are some of the things you think about? I know it's either attached to the mission, but personally, what are some of the things that go through your mind if you're pushing through on the physical side and then also, let's say, on the business side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for me, it really comes down to values. I mean, even being in the military, I would go to the training knowing like I'm on this path for a reason. Like I've ended up here for a reason. I have values, and I won't go into what all of them are, but like these are the things that I value. One of them is getting through this training. So even one of the very first training that I went to was 19 days of 4 hours of sleep and sleeping in the field, and the culminating exercise for that was a 24-mile ruck march with a 75-pound pack.
Wow.
And it just sucks. Like there is no version of this where you get through that thing thinking, yeah, that was all right. Like it just is brutal. But you only have two options. You either continue and you move towards the thing you want, or you quit and you end up on a path that immediately a path that you don't want, obviously with a different, job in the military, but then also like you on the path of quitting. So, for me, it is a very binary decision. Like I want this thing and I'm going to go get it. Now, that being said, I also leave room for me to change my mind. All of this boils down to a combination of desire and action. You desire the thing, you take action towards it. The trick to this is reevaluating at some point. Do I still have the desire? Right. So I can't see what the next year looks like for me. All I know is what the next 90 days to 6 months look like and what I think I want the year to look like. But I might realize in 90 days that I don't actually want what I thought I wanted. Maybe my values have changed. I desire something else. Now I have to take new action. And so it's just an iterative process of getting very clear about what it is that you want. And I think focusing on a contribution piece of that will allow you to really think of that from the sense of it's not about me. Because if it were all about my comfort, and I'll be honest with you, like in the military, most of the reason that I pushed through is because of the guys that I was there side by side with. Like if it were just me in an island by myself doing these physical events, I probably would have quit.
No way. Yeah.
But when you are there with dudes that are also sucking and they're tired and they're having a hard time, and those are guys you've been with like day in and day out for months, and you guys are best friends, like you're not going to let that guy go finish by himself. Like you keep going for him. So I think, that sort of ties it back into the contribution piece, but that's how you get through the hard physical training.
Community. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, having that community and that, those guys that you're aligned with, but other than that, I mean, name your mental toughness exercise, like whatever, thinking about your favorite hobby or what, just like trying to put yourself somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, just having that sense of what you want and why you want it.
And I would even go as further as of that with values that can change. I would challenge those listening to set timeless values that don't change. Because if a value is based on how you're feeling that morning or that season, that's not a value. It's more like, this is what I care about right now, right? So what are some of the things that, obviously there are seasons and there are things that you care about more than others and priorities throughout your life, right? But what are some of those values that are true pillars or foundation blocks of the building? Because with those, no matter the season, you will still stick to them. And then depending on the season, you can dynamically utilize those different values to push you through for that specific season that you're focusing on one specific goal.
Yeah, I think there's probably a good semantic difference there, but like you're saying, between the values and goals, right? Values are timeless. Yeah, that should be the stuff that moves you through regardless. No, that's a good point.
Well, Rory, what are you up to now? How can people get in contact with you? And what are you delivering right now?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm going to say the Instagram is the Rory Miller. Facebook is rory.tyler.miller. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's also the Rory Miller. So I'm all over the social media, easy to find. And then right now what I'm working on is coaching. It's helping other people find their purpose. It's a whole 6-step program that I take people through. It's all about finding the purpose, upgrading the beliefs, working on the values, a lot of that stuff we talked about here today, and then turning that into an action plan, something they can actually execute on, and really just helping people level up and live better lives and step out of their comfort zones and do, be, and have more.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'll put the show links on the notes there for you, Rory. But any closing thoughts before we hop off?
Just do hard things.
If it were that easy, right? Awesome, Rory. Well, thank you for being on. It's a pleasure having you, man.
Appreciate it, Roll. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Do Good Work podcast. If this episode resonated with you or know someone it might help, hit that subscribe and share button. If you want a clear step-by-step action plan to apply some of these principles we just talked about and the fundamental principles to grow your company and scale your impact, head over to my website, dogoodwork.io, and get my book, Productive Profits. In the book, we'll go over in detail the result-driven actions that will ensure that you grow your company safely and also reach the goals and mission you're called to achieve. Now, if you want to work directly with me to help you apply these principles in your business, head over to my page, dogoodwork.io/work with Raul. And there you'll see how it is to work with me. You'll see some kind words from other business owners, real businesses who have seen and felt the direct impact I help them create. And on that page, you'll be able to connect with me via email. We'll hop on a call. And even if we work together or not, you will leave with a customized action map for your own company. Yes, I'm that serious about providing value to anyone who comes my way. It's an honor to be part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.